Welcome to today's episode of Meike's Raumzeit. In this episode, we dive into a topic that affects all of us: how we grow our food. Agriculture is facing massive challenges: soil degradation, climate change, and the need to feed a growing global population. Digital tools and AI are becoming critical to solving these issues. One of the leading forces behind this transformation is Syngenta and CropWise, a digital farming platform. We talk about the platform in this episode and how AI is turning data into action in the field, the role of ecosystems, partners like AWS, for example, and how technology can truly empower farmers from large operations to smallholders in remote regions. I'm delighted to welcome Marco Issenmann, Head Global Digital Marketing at Syngenta. Marco and his team are helping farmers around the world make smarter, faster, and more sustainable decisions, powered by data, insight, and collaboration. Marco, great to have you here. Hello.
Hi, Meike. It's great to be here and very much welcome the opportunity to talk a bit about what AdTech is doing at the moment.
Well, could you start by introducing yourself and your role at Syngenta and give us a short pitch what exactly is CropWise, the platform, and what I've been just mentioning?
No, absolutely. I've been for nearly a decade now driving the digital agenda at Syngenta in different leadership roles. That includes the overall corporate digital strategy, then to the global CropWise platform development that we're going to talk about today, of course, to different functional transformations. I'm very passionate about Syngenta's mission to help farmers to feed an ever-growing population that you mentioned before in the world with ever more sustainable means and in ever more sustainable ways by bringing together powerful teams, connecting it with cutting-edge technology under a clear vision and a powerful purpose.
I mentioned in the intro as well the urgency of food security, soil degradation, and climate change. All these topics and issues that we're facing. Could you give us a bit to understand the big picture here? Because myself, and maybe the listeners, we're not all aware or don't know. Why is actually digital transformation and AI in particular such a critical lever in agriculture today?
Well, as you say, right, many people not being close to agriculture don't realize that in many corners of the world, farming has actually evolved quite a bit, and we're not everywhere sowing seeds by hand and plowing fields by hand, right? So if you look at how farming has evolved, having been born about 10,000 years ago somewhere, and having seen the first step change with mechanical adoption in the 17 to the 1900s. Followed by the third agricultural revolution, which was science-based and very much into yield boosting and optimizing on the field. We're now actually entering in the beginning of the fourth agricultural revolution. And that means we stand at a tipping point because feeding the world, the climate change you mentioned, global market volatility, the urgent need for sustainable farming practices mean that technology is not anymore an option to address these challenges. We can't just continue to do slightly better at the things we do until now. We need to make a step change, and so the adoption of technology is really required to make the next shift. Let me give you an example here. With precise agronomical insights generated by our tools, they usually lead to a better agricultural input. We have CropWise Protector, which is one of the platform products that I want to introduce in a minute to what CropWise is. But it supports local applications of crop protection products so that they are only applied when and where it's needed. instead of all over the fields. So one of the largest applications in Brazil, one of the big farm operators, he's gone from a practice of applying everything everywhere the same way with using one of our products to be able to do A/B testing and to see how the results differ between one field and the other. And with that, of course, he's been able to optimize his impact on the field, but also reduce his costs by about 20% of the application. I think in general, using these technologies help quite a bit to address some of the challenges that you've spoken before. But if you don't mind, let me just take a step back and just quickly talk about, you asked me before, what is CropWise?
Yes, please.
And CropWise is our flagship digital platform. It helps farmers and ag companies with agronomic advice. It is a platform which has multiple products underneath. So as you can imagine, like Microsoft with multiple, Microsoft Office with multiple PowerPoint, Word, Excel type of products underneath, which are being deployed and used dependent on the market and the crop and the actual need. So, for example, we're talking globally here about 70 million hectares, 75 million hectares that are currently covered by CropWise. That's just to give you a bit of a reference. That's about 18 times the size of Switzerland. So quite a bit of farmland which is covered, and therefore access enablement for farmers to use these type of interconnected tools and this flexibility that they then have to use them. So this is a bit of the introduction about CropWise.
Before we dive deeper into CropWise and what features and tools actually your customers can use, I would like to understand, when did it start? What was the original idea behind the platform?
The CropWise brand and platform was born in actually the beginning of COVID pandemic. So in 2020, when we're all sitting at home, not all, actually farmers not, right? But many of us were sitting at home and quarantined. And it was basically came out of a number of different products and features that we had already, but they were all developed independently across the globe. Lots of local innovation from markets to solve very local specific issues that were there at that time. Now, the problem was, of course, it's very difficult to scale. There were, different technologies, a lot of external providers. It was not connected, different data structured data sources. So it was really difficult to then take on a global level. And so we decided that we wanted to build that connected ecosystem and to build a solution that can afterwards be rolled out globally. We have invested significantly in that space. I remember back when we launched it, we had about 5 internal developers, software engineers, and at that time we started. Well, how do we get to a sizable number? And we grew organically and inorganically, and now today we have about 700 to 800 digital professionals across the globe in hubs in different continents. So we have a big hub in Brazil. We have one in the US. Different ones in Europe, Ukraine, the UK, but also Spain, and ultimately also India is a very important hub for us. That enables us not only to have 24/7 support for our products and 24/7 type of development if required, but at the same time, all of these hubs bring their specific specialities and capabilities into that ecosystem to develop these cutting-edge technology solutions worldwide.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned something very interesting. You said it came actually from it started with global different features, local, and then to the idea to kind of make them globally available. I would like to understand what are the features exactly in the platform? You mentioned before, like Microsoft features. How can a farmer use them? What's the idea there? And what are maybe local, regional differences? And how can I understand, or can I if, an example of how a global farming community, I say now, uses local insights? Is that not, I mean, how does it work to make something local global? It seems very challenging to me. I mean, everyone has different needs and different questions. So can you please walk us a bit through the step from how they work from local to global?
No, absolutely. It's a great question. I mean, as a global product development organization, we need to consider many interests when deciding what to develop. But we don't have endless resources. We're actually quite resource constrained, and we're receiving a lot of them on the platform. For us, end user engagement is the ultimate metric, how we validate if a product is successful, is going to be continued to be built when it's live. But we bring in the customer much earlier in the process. We bring in the customers in the development cycle through interviews, prototyping, testing, and when in production, we will then have digital monitoring tools that help us give us insights into when an app or a feature or a function is being used, how it's being used, when it's being abandoned. That gives us a lot of insights of how do users and people navigate the platforms and what is most useful to them, and also very specifically when it is, because agriculture is a very cyclical business. So you think about your crop plan, and then you start planting, you start protecting it, the crop growth, you need to navigate pests and climate impact, and ultimately harvest, and then you sell it and you plant. So there's different very important moments in time where different products, again, come into play. And that varies, as you just rightly said, very, very much between different geographical regions, between countries. We have different regulations. We have significantly different crops. You can imagine it's very different to grow a huge field of corn or soy versus having a glasshouse operation in tomatoes, greenhouse tomato growth, or strawberries or cucumbers, right? Yeah. Very, very different. That means different products. And our approach is basically that we develop, wherever we can, global infrastructure into the platform that allows us to reuse certain capabilities, and at the same time then build localized features dependent on highest return on investment in terms of high usage, where we have big value for customers and grows in the market. I think these functionality are actually functionality actually born out of user necessities. So let me give you an example. We have now more and more in countries, in smallholder markets, or more and more access to technologies, for example, like drones. And that significantly helps farmers to manage their operations, because drones can monitor the field with their cameras and identify issues. They can also apply fertilizers or crop protection. But not every farmer, by far not, is able to invest into a drone or has the capabilities to navigate them effectively. So out of that necessity, we then enabled a feature in one of our smallholder solutions that allows farmers to basically request a service by a local provider to go and spray or apply something on their field. And the local providers can pitch in and can, when they're available, and provide that service.
Oh, wow. It's actually as well a networking platform than in this case in certain regions.
Exactly. That's an ecosystem question that maybe we'll talk about with the well.
Yes. You mentioned now the infrastructure. Let's dive a bit deeper into the platform. What are the main data sources for CropWise? How to make sure it's available, especially as well as you mentioned, time and cycles and all that. What's where it's needed, and all of this despite network and latency challenges, depending where the farming areas are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, depending on the solution, CropWise works with a variety of different data sources. And you can imagine this includes geospatial data, satellite images, that includes soil data, it includes climate data, it includes on-farm data, it includes our own products or agronomic data. And that can, of course, be very heavy from a data perspective. Now, we work with many distributed web technology strategies when needed. We have offline capabilities through caching and in-app local databases that will be later be synchronized. So we are very aware that you have different features that are needed in the field where we have potentially very low network capacity and where the network is not reliable. And then we send it basically these kind of data packages in the background. So we have different techniques that we use to send small data packages where we have minimal signal for establishing a connection. So the objective, of course, is then to always have up-to-date technology as the customer's end and partially allowing them to operate offline. The point is that we believe that ultimately the connectivity at the farm is something that is globally solvable at some point in time. So the technology is more and more available and it's getting cheaper. It's more difficult sometimes in remote areas outside where it's still sometimes difficult. And so we use modern techniques to bring better usability to our users with balanced operational costs.
You mentioned before the ecosystem. How important is that to have it in place and for having all these, the infrastructure available?
Yeah, the ecosystem is of course really important. And we work with a lot of providers either locally to get the right data and information. As you can imagine, some of the data is not the same globally. Some of the data is very local and we need to be able to absorb it and to process it in the right way. And the ecosystem it's part of that to make it successful. It's also and something that we're gonna announce in the near future. We're actually going to launch a CropWise open platform soon, where we're inviting developers that have an interest in bringing their technologies to the end users to work on our platform. Which will enable, of course, much faster go to market for them. They will access a lot of different farmers around the globe through that platform while still being able to manage their own data, their own proprietary data, of course, in their own space, and enable, therefore, a much more wider ecosystem that, different users, but also different providers can benefit from that technology platform that we have built now over the years.
Wow, that's a really interesting, development. I'm going to bring the other side or question that pops into my head is, how did you, sell that to the management team? Because I can imagine it's a question of security probably as well for the platform and all the data that's there. Weren't there any issues, or how did you, promote that idea?
Well, I mean, the teams that are working on this are, of course, very, very conscious of data security and data standards. So we work with the highest standards to make sure that data is protected. Customer data is at the highest standard protection that we have, and making sure the platform is safe, but also is robust. That's why we're working with a lot of different technology providers to make sure that we have that flexible infrastructure, but at the same time, a global infrastructure that will be able to service all the different markets.
Yeah. Okay. I remember in one of the presentations you called CropWise a digital agronomist in your pocket. Can you explain us what that means and how at the end now it's the AI that turns all the data that you mentioned into actually actionable insights for farmers? Because I can imagine that's kind of then tricky as well, depending on how big actually the farm is and how used you are to using technology within your environment.
No, absolutely. I think a good example to showcase that is one of our applications was called CropWise Grower, a solution which is used in a growing number of development markets across Asia. One of the functionalities is called Crop Doctor. It allows users to go into the field, take a picture of a crop which has a problem, and upload it. And then within a few seconds, you get a reply with the algorithm identifying what the disease is, what the details about it, what kind of actions one could take against the disease, and when and how to use particular product for it, for example. So that gives you now complete new opportunity as a farmer to get insights that you didn't have before, where in most cases you would have to wait for an agronomist to come to your field, which will take time. Then the knowledge is not always the same of agronomists coming in, right? And here you have really a broad database and broad capability with a lot of insights from a number of markets and crops that is very difficult to achieve as agronomists that you have in your app. And at the same time, in some remote areas, you don't even have ever the option to have agronomists coming and helping you on the field. So it is really a game changer. I think, and you mentioned AI here, which is, of course, even more so a technology which will help accessibility, especially for smallholder farms in rural areas, and especially for areas where literacy rates are quite low. So we enable now in CropWise Grower the voice control and voice connectivity, where farmers don't need to type their questions anymore if they don't want to. They could just have a natural conversation about a specific problem, a specific event, and the advisor would answer automatically in the app generated with AI through voice control. And not just, of course, in English, but it needs to be in their local language, which again is also enabled through AI, which is a fantastic new opportunity that we are now harnessing and expanding through the markets. And actually just early in the year received an AI award in Zurich for that type of functionality now. And the usage to give access to a lot of farmers around the globe.
Well, congratulations on that to the award. That would have been a question, actually, because, we know many large farms have adopted all these digital tools. And, just for small farmers, smallholders, just to make sure that they're not left behind. Because I can imagine whether, as you said, language, typing, accessibility, maybe there's sometimes as well a bit of a uncertainty, or, you're not sure if that is actually, if you want to use it, and they might not trust it. How do you make sure they're not left behind? How do you kind of really make them understand what CropWise is, how they can benefit from it, and that there's no, let's say it's a simple threat?
Yeah, it's a great question. I love the question. Let me take a step back, because people not close to the agriculture industry sometimes don't have the scale and the magnitude of what we're talking about here. And I've quickly spoken about it in the AWS Summit in my keynote, where we spoke about, well, how many growers are we actually talking about? We're talking about global growers. And so next to the about 100 million large-scale farmers, you have another 500 million small-scale farmers, which is 5 times more in terms of numbers, that are in desperate need for these kind of services and an opportunity to help them to make better decisions on the field. And I think that's where, for us, we're very excited and interested in building technologies which are also servicing these kind of farms. Many of them don't have access to agronomic advice or any kind of data, and their resources and technology footprint is very limited. But what it doesn't mean is that they're not connected. So when we're talking about smartphone or telephone, mobile phone penetration, in my last visit to Vietnam, for example, we went to the Mekong Delta and spoke to quite a number of rice farmers. And when I asked them the question about, well, could you show me your mobile phone? The answer was quite surprising. It was, well, which one do you mean? Do you mean the feature phone that we tape to the field, which anyways, we don't have much reception on the field, and it's also no issue if it falls on the ground, so it doesn't break? Or is it the smartphone that we use at home for messaging to our communities and our friends and families and watching YouTube or social media? So the point is that the world is connected, and even in the farming communities, you have a lot of that technology available, and gives us a whole next level of opportunity to connect with them, to provide guidance, but also to understand what their challenges are. We're actually just publishing a brand new market study jointly conducted with Ipsos, which explores the barriers and adoption of AI and provides ideas to accelerate it. And as you can imagine, the AI divide is not only defined by the farm sites, it is also very much defined by the infrastructure that you have in a certain market, the government regulations, and also the mindset and to some extent history and age of a farmer about digital application and about farming practices. So you can imagine, right, if you have a large history of farming practices in your family and you've done this yourself for decades, it's not always easy to change that and see that there's another way to think about it. And so we appreciate that. And that's also part of where the AI divide really comes to fruition. And we see that those gaps. So we have different approaches for smallholders with apps like CropWise Grower, Spray Assist, CropWise Balance, who are designed with a simplified user experience, available in multiple languages. There's no reliance on hardware and focused on democratic access to agronomical knowledge.
Yeah. You mentioned another study. I want to quickly jump into that again. That is really interesting. Was there any kind of result that surprised you the most, what you didn't expect? I mean, you are in the field every day, but maybe you can share with us, what was surprising?
Yeah, I mean, I of course, a lot of it was like being close to the markets, being close to technology now for over 10 years in that specific sector has proven some of the assumptions we had. So the study wasn't overly completely renew our thinking, although it has certainly shown that, as I mentioned before, the technology adoption in AI has an incredible potential to close that AI divide. So I think that the opportunity we have here is quite striking. And I think being aware, so for me, the biggest insight was being aware of these factors and ability to address these specifically will make the biggest impact on farmers' ability to apply and use these technologies in a most effective way for them. And that includes, of course, training, education, information about these things, the ability to be able to make the right choices, also access them to potential technologies and ability to activate that ecosystem that we spoke about before are super critical.
Yeah, that's very interesting. How can we picture that? You mentioned now, workshops and training and show the farmers actually how to use the platform. But how can we picture it? How can we understand it? Is the farmer then getting the CropWise platform he has for his local region? The apps or features that are actually necessary or make sense, or can he choose from a certain kind of, how is it actually built and set up, the platform for globally?
Great question, Meike. Great question. We obviously, so if you're a farmer in a certain market, you will get to the app store or the Play Store that you have in your market, and you can. One end is you could go and Google for or search for the apps that are available from Syngenta, and you will find, or CropWise, you will find the number of apps that are available to you for your region. And so that is one way to go about it. So of course, there's a lot of, as well, mouth-to-mouth discussions and people talking about it. And then there's our local commercial teams, which are helping growers to understand what would be most useful for them in the market. So it's quite tailored in that sense that only apps which are relevant to a certain markets are being actually published in those app stores. And so that growers don't get confused with the variety of things that may work or not work. Because as you could imagine that an algorithm that works really well for one market could actually work not at all for another market, because you have different soil types, you have different climatic conditions, you have different growth stages of specific crops, that if you try to just use that algorithm from one market to the other, it would just, it needs actually a lot of adjustment. And that's one of the challenges we have, because we want to scale these solutions and algorithms to service as many customers as possible.
Yeah.
But the challenge is that you can't just take it and shift and lift it. It really requires a lot of additional work. It's not like you have a Uber app that in principle works very similar everywhere, and you can just activate it. Of course, there's more than what I just described, but ultimately there's a lot of algorithms in the background which need to be adjusted depending on the specific market conditions, the crops and climatic environment, and regulations, of course, because global regulations about data privacy and so forth are really important to adhere to.
Mm-hmm. And do you have then training teams on site? I mean, I can imagine that some farmers might say, hey, listen, I got the apps, it's great, but how do I use it now? How does it fit into my workflow? How can I actually, and which phone of the 3 that I have maybe is the one I need for what? Can you is there something set up like that then?
Yeah, that's another great question. Now, we have more sophisticated apps which do require help. And so we are also working with our channel partners, advisors that work with farmers to enable them to use these apps and to help them basically to provide insights into agronomic challenges through these kind of different, not ultimately the farmers, but through the channel. That, of course, requires us to upskill and train a smaller number of individuals, which ultimately then can serve a bigger number of end users. There are some products which, and mostly in the evolving markets, need to be self-explanatory.
Okay.
Because it's and you can imagine it's very similar to what we do, Meike, when we have apps that we need guidance on. Let me ask you that. How many apps have you ever downloaded and have either used once or somewhere hidden on your smartphone, never to be seen again, or you deinstalled immediately because it was just not useful. It wasn't clear. You found easily a better alternative. The user interface was complicated. It took too long to get to the conclusion. It didn't solve the issue that you wanted to be solved. So it's the same with the farmers, the growers. So they need to have something which works as simple and straightforward as possible. And that's why also being very close with our end users in the process for development is critical for us, because that's where we're able to learn what works, what doesn't work. And it needs to, as I said, right, it needs to be part of their daily process. Otherwise, it's something that they'll do maybe later and most likely not. So it needs to work when they need it and when they are in the process, either home on the field.
Yes, absolutely. And I guess, I and many of our listeners can relate to that. And that's absolutely understandable. I would like to come back to one point that you mentioned, all the regulations that you have globally and, for the different regions. So the farmers rely on that, actually, the CropWise and for critical decisions. And how do you now ensure that the transparency is there, that the trust is there, that all the, such high stakes contacts are actually, given, knowing what you mentioned before as well, there is a big ecosystem behind it. You work with different partners for the infrastructure, you work with partners in different regions. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, it's a really important topic for us. Because CropWise follows a very customer-centric approach. So therefore, transparency, trust, ethical use of data and AI need to be at the core of it. Agriculture is a very long cyclical business. So if you think about it as a farmer in many areas, in many parts of the world, you go through an annual cycle. You think about two crops, you plan for it, you apply, you harvest, and then again, you prepare for next year, but in very short and simple terms. Now, how many times do I go as a farmer through that process? Maybe 40 times in my year. So I'm taking 40 times that decision. It's not what it's like I'm buying or I'm going and consuming some music. I'm buying something in the store, right? Some cookies. I can do this today, I can do this tomorrow. So my decision is much more frequent. Now, if you have these long cycles, you're going to be working with people you trust. You're going to be working with people that you believe have your best intention at heart. And so we as a company have this ingrained, not just in our digital products, but also in our physical products, and that trust and that reliability and transparency. So that is why for us, it's a non-negotiable. And we believe that trust is the foundation of what we do as a business. Now, by principle, we don't share, for example, customer data without consent. And too many agri-tech apps focus purely on the technology. And you've seen this certainly in many other industries where it's like, oh, this is really cool. Let's develop this app, and they have a really cool solution, and let's push it out and people will love it. In some cases, this works, but rarely this ends up ultimately at the farmer level and really being scaled, because you need to adjust and be able to really understand what is necessary at the farming level, how their needs change as well, because you can imagine that having a phone or not makes a big difference, how you operate on the farm and how you're able to do things. And so being able to do that, being close to the customer, following and giving them the trust that their data is handled with the utmost care under the strictest data privacy regulations, for example, a SOC 2, which is a certification we have, or also Act Transparency, which just demonstrates that for us, this is really important to have these robust security measures for data protections and ensure that our users, their agricultural data is handled with the high standard.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. With that, it just pops up another question to my mind. Knowing that we have in different markets different regulations regarding the use of AI and what you can do and how to use it, how did that impact for you, the developing as well, how you actually provide your services globally?
No, it's a great question. It's something we're challenged every day on. Also with the geopolitical landscape moving and evolving, we need to be very, very mindful what type of products we're developing for which countries. Let's say in one country, as a farmer, you need to report your usage of crop protection products on your field. And so it can be an opportunity to actually enable whatever is being applied or suggested in the app to be then reported to the government, of course, all through official processes, where in another country this might not be required or not wished for, exactly. Then we have other regulations where you cannot take data out of a country to be processed in another country. And I think that's also really important for us when we think about our infrastructure, that we're able to very, very clearly have these firewalls between the data infrastructures, and we're able to leverage basically some of the technology to process an algorithm to process information, but to keep these very distinct, to make sure that we adhere to these regulations. So as a globally operated company, we're of course very, very mindful, and it's a very important topic to us to understand what the market needs, what the regulations are, and then ultimately we'll adjust. We have, to be honest, learned this in the physical space over the decades we've been working in the industry, but also over the last 10 years now in the digital space, very, very well and needed to, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to build one of the largest AgTech platforms that we have in the world.
Exactly. That would be my question. How does that impact the organizational setup that drives exactly this transformation of CropWise and inside Syngenta?
Yeah, that's an interesting other topic. We, as an agriculture company, and our physical product development cycles are 10, 12 years. So when we start to think about a new product in the chemical space, or seed space, it takes us many, many years until it actually gets through all of the process steps, all of the approvals, the regulatory approvals, but ultimately also then landing in through production in the markets. And that's a very different mindset than with a digital product. So where you want to test and experiment. And I think that was a very interesting journey we had to go as a company, where we worked with a lot of startups, but also big tech companies which have a different type of operating model. And when we also joined forces with some of them, or we acquired startups which had these very unique capabilities that we wanted to leverage for our solutions, then we also, of course, needed to create an environment where they can thrive and also be successful. So that was, especially in the beginning of our digital journey, I remember the times was a big cultural change, an ability to have these two-speed systems where we work with an organization which has a certain cycle, and at the same time, we bring new technologies to farmers and the ecosystem that have a very different type of cultural background and development, not just from a product perspective, but even the people that we brought into Syngenta to be able to work on those.
And what was for you the biggest lesson regarding that cultural change that you had to go through, that you would maybe share with other listeners that might be in similar situations? Or
that's a great question. I'm not sure if I could answer the biggest lesson, but some of the lessons are certainly it create an environment where you can have the ability to have a process of change, where you own end-to-end change and you go from point A to point B to point C step by step. I think too many companies try to do this in one go. Let's move immediately from A to Z. We have 2 months, and then everything needs to be implemented there. We took a different approach in my case, and it proved quite successful. Where I said, well, let's bring in new elements, new cultural elements. Let's start to merge them with what we do. But let's make a step from both sides to embrace a new environment, isolated to some extent, where you say these things can operate in isolation, don't need to be connected. And what are the elements that need to be connected to the rest of the organization that we do need to have an interface which has the same speed and the same language and the same culture? So defining where these interfaces are and managing them well, allowing that freedom to operate in a different environment, and ultimately having and giving time for this transformation is, I think, the biggest learnings from my side that I would apply again. And I mean, these learnings are as relevant today, even more so with AI than before. Now with AI, of course, the cycles are even faster. The development is even more accelerated. It's what I call hyper agility. So not just agility, but it's hyper agility. And if you think about it, a few years ago when we went through many of the digital transformations, you came to a certain level of flying altitude after a certain time. So you used a new app or you implemented a new software, a new platform, and you kept it there and you used it. And so the organization had time to absorb it and after the change. Now, I think AI will require complete different thinking in that space, because yes, we're going to adopt new technologies and new platforms, but they will adapt and evolve so quickly again that we need to have an infrastructure in place for our solutions, for our customers, that enables adoption of the back end, of the middleware, of the infrastructure in a short amount of time. And so that hyper agility and not having a cruising altitude where you say, well, it's implemented, tick box, we're now fine, is something that will keep us very, very alert in the next decades as we're trying to embrace the new rules of how AI is going to operate and how we're going to be able to absorb AI.
As we're looking ahead, you mentioned that you will open the platform for developers, but how do you see CropWise evolving in the next years?
Yeah, great question. And I think the future of CropWise is very exciting, at least in my mind and many of my colleagues. We have lots of cool stuff in the pipeline and are experimenting daily on how to leverage newest technologies and AI in particular, but also other things that can bring value to our end customers and our farming community. I think I would think about it, first of all, everything we do and is going to come in the next few years is going to continues to be farmer-centric. So we'll continue to put our end users So the customers, the farmers at the center of our development, making sure that the features we develop are indeed needed and solve real issues and the most important issues. Soil health and biodiversity, for example, will certainly continue to grow in importance, and with it, our solutions and our products. The other part, I think, is AI. We spoke about it before with the study, but also with some of the exercises we do as a great equalizer. We believe AI can provide many more farmers through AI the latest technologies that today sometimes are unique to more bigger farms in specific parts of the world. More automation, further simplification of complex data analysis, and more precise predictions. And quite literally in the language that people use in their country. Yeah. So, for example, CropWise operations, we're going to expand the services to benefit more growers in wider geographies. And that is a more complex farm management system that in the past you would have not thought about using in smallholder markets, but there are opportunities that we see that we can bring now. And I think, third of all, I would say the ecosystem of CropWise, and we spoke about it as well before, not just to give agronomic advice as it's supposed to be a platform to connect the entire value chain and trade marketplace, and the open platform is certainly something that we're going to put a lot of emphasis on as we're now launching it. And the organization setup, there's not just within Syngenta, but actually across the industry. And since we have been trained our muscles certainly quite a bit over the last years now in that space to work with a lot of partners, we'll continue to do that. I think that's going to be an important pillar to connect with specialists, with big companies and platforms to be able to provide as valuable services to as many that can actually use it.
Oh, wow, that is very interesting. That's then the next step of, the local global ecosystem. Exactly.
Yeah, yes. An integration, of course, in physical products, right? You have now, the meta glasses that can absorb information. And you have certainly seen, right, so imagine a farmer in the future with meta glasses looking at their fields and just having their CropWise companion to look at, to help them to identify issues that he or she cannot see, combining it with hundreds of different data sources. So I think using technology, which is going to be more and more available in different parts of the world, to actually provide insights into agronomic practices and help farmers to grow crops in a more sustainable, in a more cost-effective, and ultimately also in a better way to have more yields to ensure food security is going to continue to be part of what we try to do.
Yeah. Are you working on that technology-wise with the glasses?
Not in particular, no. As an example of what it could look like. Yeah. And ultimately, I mean, if you think about the example I shared with you before with the crop doctor, that you can take a picture, right? I mean, the camera is a camera, and ultimately being able to identify that. We're testing things with robo-dogs on the fields, right? Where you have robo-dogs in our research lab testing, field monitoring and looking at phenotyping and opportunities to augment our ability to monitor activities on the field, not just through satellite, drones, your camera in your phone, but also through other means. I think that we'll see a lot of evolution in that space for sure. That will be very close to.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I think that's very inspiring, that there are actually no boundaries or no limits to use it for using technology actually for the better, for the human and for the good. Thank you very much, Marco, for being here with us today in the episode of Meike's Raumzeit and for actually sharing how digital transformation and AR are helping farmers worldwide making smarter and more sustainable decisions through this CropWise platform. For me personally, and for you as well, dear listeners, it was very inspiring to see or to hear how technology can really create an impact not just for productivity. Yes, that's one part, but really for a topic that affects every one of us. It's for agriculture, the way we grow our food, and at the end, for the planet as well. Thank you very much, Marco, for being here with us today.
No, I appreciate the opportunity, Meike. Thank you so much. And next time anyone, bites into some kind of food, maybe some of these thoughts come to mind, where this all started and how the different components all have to play that ultimately you have that food on your plate.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Meike.